अभी इसी से शेयर करवा दे बस।
वहाँ से हो गया काम? चलें। आपने उसको ऑन कर दिया?
जी।
Right, okay.
Is he already live?
Live,
Yeah,
live.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're waiting for actually Jimshed to start. Shall we start?
Finish.
I think it is already recorded. We wait 1 or 2 minutes.
Oh,
Okay, okay. So,
this is great.
sometimes it's not a problem. But you're going live and you're doing
मुझे पता है खालिद जहीर कॉल है। हाँ, नाम देने पेज से नहीं आएगा। आएगा आएगा।
Yes, this one.
अच्छा 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 राइट हाँ तो ये होता है कि ये लोग नाराज होते हैं तो कहते हैं ये हमारा क्या दोष तो हम उनको ये कहते हैं हमारे
इसकी WhatsApp तो नहीं। इसका
Right. Fair enough. I cannot be loud enough to make them hear. Then I should not be here.
यार कोई भी नहीं है।
Dr. Khalid Zaheer is your grand professor because he is my professor. You are my student. Okay? Like we have granddad, similarly we have grand professor. Okay?
So, what subject did you study?
He studied computer literacy from me, I think, and
Programming and database.
database.
Right.
I studied too from him. That's why. I don't know you remember or not.
I was talking to somebody the other day and I could recall that something of that sort.
I studied actually business communication. And second was Islamic ethics. Okay, can we start?
Democratic. Yeah. Right. उसमें लिखा
We should.
Yeah.
He's mashallah professional. I've seen him work before. He's recorded some of my lectures.
इसका भी टाइम लगना है। क्यों रखनी है? ये लोग तो नहीं ऊपर के
start himself?
Yes.
Auzubillahiminashaitanirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming over today. Alhamdulillah, we are very lucky. We are having a very eminent scholar of modern times, and Alhamdulillah, he is visiting Japan. He is having a tour of Japan, and today is his lecture in Beppu. I hope, inshallah, we are going to really benefit from Dr. Khalid Zaheer's talk. And for the benefit of all of you, I would like to tell, Dr. Khalid Zaheer was also one of my teachers. I have studied from him as well. Very impressive teacher, very fine orator, mashallah. So I think, inshallah, we are all going to benefit from his today's talk, inshallah. Dr. Khalid, sir, it's all yours now.
نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن
आप
الرحيم
जाइए मैं कर लेता हूँ.
وما أرسلناك إلا رحمة للعالمين صدق الله العظيم. It's indeed a matter of great honor and pleasure for me that I have been given the opportunity to come to a beautiful place like Beppu in Japan, and secondly to be able to speak before a gathering of devoted Muslim brothers and sisters. And I have been asked to speak on the topic, why Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may God's mercy be on him, was the most influential personality in the entire humanity. This statement or understanding was actually made by an author, Michael Hart, who in his book, The 100, picked 100 most influential individuals in human history. And in his book, he ranked Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the most influential person who influenced humans more than anybody else. And while justifying his selection, his decision, what he mentioned was that there was no other person who had been supremely successful both in religious as well as secular domains. So in other words, what he said was that I was impressed by him, which caused me to pick him as the most influential person in human history. The cause was that I could see that he was quite as successful in religious matters, in influencing his followers in matters which are spiritual, religious in nature, as he was in matters which were secular, worldly in nature. I have been asked to explain as to how did it come about? What exactly happened that caused him to reach that status? The first thing that I would mention is that the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, going by his own account, was a man like any other man. The only thing that he himself claimed distinguished him from the rest of humans was that he belonged to the category of humans who were chosen by God as God's prophets. So he, on the one hand, declared that I am a human like you, but on the other he said, I have been selected, chosen by God to deliver his message to the rest of the mankind, like God chose many other prophets before me. Now, because Prophet alayhi salam, may God's mercy be on him, was able to put across his case, his claim that he was God's messenger effectively, convincingly. He was able to attract a large number of people who followed him, and because his presentation was so effective that the people who accepted him, who believed in him, they believed in him genuinely and followed him as best as was possible for them. And that is what caused him to be what he was. Very effective, genuine, profound leader of humans, which in the eyes of many people who did not even believe him to be the prophet, he was successful both in the religious as well as in the worldly domain of human efforts, human endeavors. How did it all happen? Obviously, when he started his mission, he was all alone. There was nobody who believed in him to begin with, except for a handful of a few relatives, friends. The rest of the humans did not accept his claim. But then, when he presented his case, when he presented his dawah, his message, people started accepting it gradually. And they not just accepted it, they accepted the message wholeheartedly. Now, how did it happen? He claimed that what I am telling people is not my own word, it's not my message, it's God's message. And I am only God's representative in this world. If you accept my message, you are actually accepting God's message. So he presented a book, the Quran, and he claimed that this book is from God. I have not authored it. I am not the one responsible for creating it. It's God, our creator, our sustainer, who has revealed this book to me and has asked me to deliver it to the rest of the mankind. So, obviously, the question is, why did people accept his claim? How did he make people convinced that what he is claiming is indeed true? Now, for that purpose, we need to read the Quran, the book that he presented with a claim that is from God. Now, when we read the Quran says clearly that in order for a human, for a man or a woman to believe God's message, he or she has to use her intellect, reasoning. You have to be reflecting, understanding, and using your mind, your intellect, for you to decide as to whether the message is from God or not. The Quran tells us that those who do not use their intellect, who are stubborn, rigid, they don't open up their minds, they rigidly follow their own point of view, they are worse than beasts. This is what the Quran mentions in Surah Anfal, the 8th chapter, verse 22. Another very remarkable verse of the Quran, whose reference is very easy to remember. It's Surah Yunus, chapter number 10, verse number 100. So it's 10:100. The verse says, Ma kana li nafsin an tu'mina. It is not possible for a human to believe illa biiznillah, except by God's permission, except by God's leave. وَيَجْعَلُ الرِّجْسَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. And he casts filth, dirt around those people who don't use their intellect. When you read this verse in the reverse order, what the Almighty is saying is that those people who don't use their intellect properly, they find themselves surrounded by, embraced by dirt, filth, the dirt of desires, base desires, bias, prejudice, hatred, and so on. And this dirt which surrounds them does not allow them to have faith. God does not give them the opportunity, the privilege to have faith. What I'm trying to say is that the Prophet, may God mercy be on him, presented his message and claimed it to be from God and mentioned it clearly. The book clarifies most unequivocally that in order for you to decide whether it's God's book or not, you've got to use your intellect, your understanding properly and honestly. If you will do it, you will get it. If you will not do it, you will not get it. Now, the question still remains. How did he help people who were using their intellect to be able to be convinced that this book is indeed from God? Now, before I explain the details of how he proved his case or how the Quran proves its claims, let me briefly mention what exactly does the Quran invite humans to believe. What are the claims of the message of the Prophet, may God mercy on him? In other words, there are three important claims that this message makes. Or call it, there are three important elements of faith which the Quran and the Prophet, God mercy on him, invite humans towards. A, there is an almighty, great God, the Creator. He is the only one who created the entire existence. And He is the only one who is running it, sustaining it, enabling the entire existence, including humans, to survive. That's one important reality which the Quran invites humans towards. And the Quran goes further to say that because that's a reality, we must worship our God, the Creator, the Sustainer. We must seek all divine help from Him and nobody else. The second claim that the Quran makes is that this life of ours, this worldly life, starting from our birth, ending with our death, is nothing but a trial. It's a test. This life is going to be followed by another life after the day of judgment, when humans are going to be held accountable on the basis of what they did in this life. And those who performed well, they're going to succeed, and they will get the privilege of living in a beautiful world of paradise forever. And those who performed poorly, who had bad morals, who refused to understand the truth, shall be punished, and they shall be punished forever. That's the second part of the claim. And the third element of faith, the third reality towards which the Quran invites all humanity, is that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, God's mercy on him, is the messenger of God. The Quran is the book of God. And therefore, whoever comes to learn about it should accept this reality. Because accepting the messenger of God, the representative of God, is actually accepting God's message. And rejecting him tantamounts to rejecting God and his message. Now, all these three claims were supported by arguments so that humans are able to understand, they are able to be convinced, and they believe. You know what, brothers and sisters? Many of us believe because we were born to families where our elders were believing. So we also started believing. Like there are many other religious communities different from us who believe in other faiths. There again, children are born, they are brought up, and they believe what their elders believe. Neither their belief nor our belief carries any weight unless we believe properly, genuinely, from inside our hearts. And for that purpose, what we need to do is to consider the message and to look at the arguments, understand them properly, and then, say from inside our hearts that this indeed is true. So let me tell you briefly the arguments that the Quran presents for each of these important elements of faith. Let it be a revision for us. I'm sure many of you know them already. And if you don't, let it be an opportunity for you to be introduced to those arguments. Because beliefs are a claim. They are a statement. In order to acknowledge them, we've got to understand them properly, and we've got to internalize them here so that we are convinced. Before I start mentioning those arguments, let me say one thing. You know, going by the understanding of the Quran, you don't start believing all of a sudden. It comes to you gradually. It takes time. You go through a period of struggle. You understand, you question, you discuss, and then you gradually start becoming convinced more and more. And there is no end to the level of conviction that you can attain. Faith and Iman can go deeper and deeper. And by the way, faith can also get weaker if we don't take it seriously. But what exactly is it based upon? Number one, the Quran tells us that there is only one God, one creator of this entire universe, the entire world existence, and He is the one who is running its affairs, taking care of everything. He is all knowledgeable, He is all merciful, He is all wise, He is all powerful. But why should one believe Him? Why should a human believe in that God? The Quran essentially mentions three arguments, or call them three different reasons that one, when considers them, one gets convinced that it really is the truth. Number one, the Quran tells us that the first humans the first human couple that came to this world, Adam and Eve, they had a first-hand, direct experience with God. Did they see God or not? Well, I don't know. Probably not. But they did have an experience of God, which was very direct. God was speaking to them. God was giving them directions. They followed them. And in one case, they didn't follow him. And then they were asked to leave the garden and to go into the world where they were to be tried. So this was a serious, real, genuine experience. I don't know how long did it last, but it actually happened. And the Quran mentions this story, well, at least 7 times in different parts of its surahs. Obviously, when Adam and Eve, Adam alayhi salam and Hawwa alayhi salam, they had children, they must have informed them about this experience. And their children must have informed about this story to their children, and so on. So the fact that the entire humanity, all nations, no matter wherever they live, no matter whatever the language, have names for the Creator is not an accident. It didn't happen without any reason. It happened because the story of humanity began with a real direct experience of God. So don't be surprised if all human languages, if all nations, no matter wherever they live, they are familiar with the understanding of God, Allah, Khuda, and so on. So that's one aspect which the Almighty is telling us that you should be aware of. The second thing that the Quran tells us is that even before we came to this world, we were given an experience of God. Call it spiritual experience. The Almighty assembled all of us, not in this physical form, but in some spiritual form, and asked this question to the entire assembly of humans. Alastu bi rabbikum? Am I not your Lord? The word alastu, lust, alast, this has been employed to call that incident, that story as the alast, the truth of alast. He asked, am I not your Lord? Haru bala. They all said, why not? And he mentioned and clarified that I am doing this. I am making this arrangement so that tomorrow you are not able to say that we did not know it. Our forefathers were worshipping deities other than God. How could we know that? You are the only one. And then, after this experience, he sent humans to this world. You and us, me and everybody. Obviously, you're looking at me and you might be asking, and you must ask. Sir, we don't remember it. It's true. It's true that we don't remember it. But the Quran is absolutely clear and emphatic. Now, what is the nature of this experience? For an experience that you have already gone through, it's not necessary that you have a memory of it. It's not necessary. Long time ago, in my childhood, I was fiddling with my right ear and it got twisted. And it got twisted permanently. When I see my right ear in the mirror, it's twisted. It's not straight. I don't remember when it happened. I don't remember the incident. But the evidence of it is there with a twisted ear on my right side. Likewise, we have injuries when we were infants sometimes. And the mark of the injury is there, but you forget how it happened. But the mark reminds you there is something that happened. Likewise is the case with this spiritual experience. We don't remember when it happened. But the influence, the effect of that incident, that experience, is there in the hearts, in the nature of every human being. So that, just to help you understand, so that when some people who say that we don't believe in God, or who are unmindful of God, not taking Him seriously, when they are reminded of God and they are invited to understand Him, you know what happens? When they realize that there is a God, they get emotional. Sometimes they cry. They lament the fact that they didn't believe in Him before. Why should you get emotional on understanding something which earlier you did not understand? You know, if there is a theorem which you didn't understand earlier, but a good teacher helped you understand by giving good example, you would not start crying. But in this particular case, you get emotional. Why? Because you had that memory, that mark inside you, but you were ignoring it. And once you realize that it actually is true, your memory, it gets revived and you actually get strongly inclined. There is a similar case that the Quran mentions about the fact that we were informed about what is good and what is bad, what is evil and what is virtue before we came to this world. That is why nobody has to teach us, to tell us that telling a lie is bad, or causing harm to others is bad, helping out others is good, and being truthful is good. It's already there inside us. All that needs to be done is to just think, focus, and be honest. And you start realizing that there is something that has been given to you already. Okay, so now, the Quran says that there is one God who is the creator and who is the sustainer, who is running this world. And tells us that it is a direct experience of that God from where the story of humankind started. The Quran tells us that the same God required all of us to acknowledge Him spiritually before we came to this world. But it also says that use your intellect. Look at the world around you and then decide for yourself whether this world has been created, has come about as a fluke, or has been created by a God who is mighty, who is provident, providing, who is merciful, who is wise. So that the Quran says, for example, that when you look at this world around you, you find that in the world that you are living in, there is discipline. You know, these heavenly bodies, numerous stars, planets that are spread across, they are all there, moving around and doing it in a manner that is all very disciplined. So disciplined is the system of the world that we are living in, that you know what, I was there in Osaka this morning, and I wanted to know at what time the sun is going to rise. I went to this Google search, and I was informed. So many minutes past 6. It was decided beforehand. Such is the accuracy of the timings of things that are happening. Your trains in Japan and many other things are accurate as well. You know why? Because they have worked hard at it. But long time before this happened, this world was already disciplined. The Quran invites the attention of humans to use their intellect and to see that the world that they are living in is a disciplined world. And the Quran invites the attention of humans to see that the world that they are living in is providing them You know, I am a human with lots of needs. Like I need water to quench my thirst. All of us. And water is there. I have a need, and that need is properly looked after by something which is absolutely exactly according to what my need was to satisfy. Likewise, I get hungry, and there are plenty of foods available. I need air to breathe, and the air is exactly of the kind, of the quality that I need to remain alive. And there are hundreds and thousands and millions of needs, and science is discovering more and more of them, which I as an individual, we as humans, we need them. And they are all being taken care of. So we are living in a world where we are being provided. Our needs are being taken care of. So there is discipline, there is providence, there is wisdom. You know, the manner this world is functioning, it seems that there is planning. Somebody is planning it. And it's happening in a manner that the plans, they materialize. I'll just give you one example. It said that for the egg to be hatched and for the chick to come out, you need 21 days of an environment which is cozy, warm. Otherwise, it will not happen. And it so happens that there is this creature, hen, that gets on top of the eggs for 21 days, forgetting about all other needs, and does what is needed for eggs to hatch. This is what is called planning. This is wisdom. There is a need, and there are arrangements made for the need to be taken care of. So there is wisdom. The Quran points out that when you see the world around you and you use your intellect, you will find discipline, you will find providence, you will find wisdom, you will find mercy, and you cannot deny it. And goes on to say that this is because there is a mighty God, a providing God, a wise God, a merciful God. When you don't believe in Him, it's all dark. You are ignorant. You don't understand properly. But once you start believing in Him properly, then you come into the light of true knowledge. That is what the Quran says, Allahu Nur Samawati wal Ard. Belief in God is the light of the heavens and the earth. That is, once you believe in God properly, you come into light, you understand, and you are enlightened. So, what I'm saying is that the Quran presents its claim and supports it with arguments and requires the reader to reflect deeply, to understand properly. Brothers and sisters, unfortunately at times, religious people, they are used to some fantastic stories which God knows happened or didn't happen. So their taste somehow becomes such that when Quranic arguments are presented, they cannot concentrate, because there's another way of thinking, emotional way of thinking that is presented to them. The Quran emphasizes that it is a purely intellectual way of understanding that has to be done, has to be gone through in order for belief to first be properly understood and then acknowledged. That is why I said, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes concentration, it takes reflection. And the Quran says that belief is going to come to the individual who is going to use his intellect properly. The second claim of Quran is, the second claim made by the Prophet, may God bless him, is that there is another life. This life is not the only life. There is going to be another life after death. The Quran says that if you look at this life of yours, you will find that in this life, God has created everything in pairs. Everything is pairs. There is day and there is night. They are in pairs. You know what it means? During daytime you can work. There is light. But then you get tired. And therefore you need the darkness of night to take rest. There is heaven and there is earth. There is sun above us. You have rainfall from above. And then you've got soil where you get crops from. These crops would not grow if the sun doesn't give its rays, if the water doesn't fall from the sky in the form of rain. So the heaven, the sky, and the earth, they are a pair. So the Quran says, whatever God has created, He has created in pairs as partners, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ, so that you may ponder and reflect. Now, what is a pair? A partner in a pair has certain things which are good, positive, but it has certain flaws. It has certain weaknesses, like day and night, like heavens and the earth, like man and woman, like plants, like animals, etc. So, in order for a reality to be completed, you've got to have two things together, so that one compensates for, takes care of the weaknesses, flaws of the other. The Quran says, وَمِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا زَوْجَيْنِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. Whatever we have created in pairs so that you may ponder and reflect. And then the Quran tells us that this life of yours that you are living is also one partner of a pair. It is incomplete, like night is incomplete, like the day is incomplete, like this soil is incomplete, like the heavens, above us, they are incomplete. Man is incomplete, woman is incomplete. Similarly, this life is incomplete. And the principle is that everything is in pairs. Now, for this life, if it can be shown that it is incomplete, there has to be another partner. And that partner is the life hereafter. Without the life hereafter, this life is meaningless. Doesn't make sense. Why? Because the principle is that everything has been created in pairs. Now the Quran goes on to show how this life is incomplete. This life is brilliant. We all enjoy it. We all like it. We want to do as well as we can. We want to make money. We want to enjoy it. We want to have peace. We want to have long life. We want to have good health. And yet, this life is incomplete. Why? The Quran tells us there is injustice in this life. And justice cannot be completely done here. Why? Well, because people are unjust, greedy. Also because information is incomplete. Also because of the fact that, what can you do? Some people die young. Some people have, get a very long age to live with. Some people are healthy. Others are not healthy. Some people are rich. Others are not. And so on. Some people are intelligent. Others like me are not. So it's not fair, We're not equals. And therefore, we see this worldly life and we notice that it's not fair. Likewise, in this life, we try to smile, we try to enjoy it, but the fact of the matter is that in our life, we have tragedies, we have sorrows. There's some people we loved and they're already dead. This is a reality. And moreover, there are fears of the future. You know, we know that the future is uncertain. We can be taken ill. We can lose our jobs. We'll grow old, and so on. So this life has a problem as far as, you know, it's if you're looking at the objective of truly and completely enjoying it, it's not possible. It's not possible. And finally, this life is incomplete because we know that we're all going to die. Death takes away from life the possibility of it being perfect and complete. So the Quran points at all these things and says that this life is incomplete and therefore it is in need for another life, for the reality of life to be completed. And that life is the life hereafter, where God is going to ensure complete justice, A, where there are going to be no sorrows of the past and no fears of the future, La khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun, B, and where death is going to be eliminated. Khalidina fiha abada. They're going to live therein forever. So this life makes no sense. It is incomplete, imperfect. It is inconsistent with the scheme of life, where everything is impaired without the next life. So that the Quran says that the next life has to happen. It is absolutely essential. There is no way of explaining this worldly life without another life. You might ask, what is the problem with the next life for it to need this life as its partner? Well, the answer is that the next life of eternity would be meaningless if we did not have a worldly life of trial before it. So the worldly life of trial would make the next life of reward and punishment meaningful. And then the Quran tells us that if you believe in a God who is fair, if you believe in a God who is wise, if you believe in a God who is merciful, if you believe in a God who is providing, then you ought to believe that there's got to be a life hereafter. Because a just and wise God cannot see things happening, going wrong, and not do anything. You know, when non-religious people, they challenge us, one of the things that they say is, where is your God? Why is he not coming to the rescue, help of those people who are suffering? They ask this question. The answer is nothing, except for the fact that God has decided this life to be a life of trial. Therefore, he has allowed people to have freedom. But he is not in a hurry to ensure that justice takes place, because he is going to arrange another life wherein all injustices are going to be taken care of. People are going to be given full justice over there. Nobody is going to be allowed to run away. And there is going to be a life lasting forever where people are going to be given rewards and punishments in accordance with their performance. So the Quran presents its case to prove the claim that there is one and only one God by giving arguments. The Quran proves its case by presenting arguments to show that there indeed is a life hereafter. I don't have time to explain that, like the question, why should there be a life hereafter, the Quran also explains how is it possible that there should be a life hereafter. How is it possible that people would die and that they will be recreated? How is it possible that all information that will be needed to do complete justice shall be available? The Quran gives arguments for it. You know why? So that you read it, so that you understand it, and then you accept it and believe it. Last but not the least, I hope you're not tired. Last but not the least, if some of you feel sleepy, it's because of the satisfaction that the Almighty gives when you're listening to something which is from God and is making sense. Don't worry. Last but not the least, Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Muhammad is the messenger of God, is the third important claim of the Quran, of the messenger. You know what? When you read the Quran, you would find that the Quran is full of arguments, replete with arguments that are showing, proving, convincing to the reader that this is true. There are 4 different categories of arguments that the Quran has presented to show that the claim that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the messenger of God is true. One argument is the argument of his character, which the Quran has presented. The other argument is the argument of the Quran itself. A third argument is the argument of the fact that the Prophet, before he came to this world, information about him was given by the earlier prophets. He was prophesied. His arrival was announced before he came. And the fourth argument, which is spread across in the different chapters of the Quran, is that right from the beginning, when the Prophet ﷺ announced that he is the messenger of God, he also announced something else very clearly, very confidently. You know what? That I am Rasulullah, the messenger of God. Therefore, my message is going to prevail. It will dominate. People will not be allowed to dominate him. He will dominate. This is what the Quran mentioned right from the beginning. And it was mentioned so clearly that there were stories of messengers mentioned, that it happened to them. Nuh alayhi salam came, he delivered the message, people rejected him, and they were punished. Likewise, the Prophet said, I am also the messenger of God. If you will reject me, you will be punished as well. So these are 4 different categories of arguments that the Quran mentions over and over again to show the Prophet of Allah, may God's mercy be on him, is indeed correct in his claim that he is receiving God's message. The character of the Prophet, we all know, was something which even his enemies acknowledged. And they also knew that for the first 40 years of his life, he had no interest in philosophical matters. He did not even know how to read and write. He was an exceptionally honest person. A sadiq, the truthful, al-amin, the trustworthy. No interest, however, in any of the things which, let's say, philosophers, intellectuals, poets say. And after living for 40 years, he came up with a message which was brilliant, sublime, effective, impressive, both in language and its contents. And the Quran challenged everybody who was present. وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا. If you are in any doubt about what we have revealed to our servant, فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ, then bring forth one surah, chapter like it, in kuntum sadiqeen, if you're really truthful. فَإِلَّمْ تَفَلُوا, then if you're not able to do it, وَلَنْ تَفَلُوا, and you will most certainly not be able to do it. فَاتَّقُوا النَّارِ, then fear the fire, وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ, whose fuel shall be men as well as stones. Now this is remarkable. You know, all great poets, all great scientists, all great philosophers, all great orators, they don't start doing it at the age of 40. They start from an early age, and then they practice, they improve, and then they correct themselves, and they reach a climax at the later stages of their lives. The Prophet ﷺ did none of those things. In fact, he didn't even know how to write or read. And yet, after reaching the age of 40, he presented a message in the name of God for the next 22, 23 years, which was so brilliant that, for example, one poet, Labid, who was an outstanding poet of his times, whose Qasida, a genre of poetry, was given the privilege of being hung on the wall of Kaaba. It was a muallaka because of its brilliance. He became a Muslim. And when he was later asked as to why does he not do poetry anymore, he said, Abad al-Quran. Can I do it? And evidence. The second thing is the Quran itself. The Quran has contents. The Quran has a message. And you know this message? It's a message of faith, Iman. And I've already told you, the Quran invites people to have faith, not by telling them that, look here, believe or I'll kill you. The Quran doesn't say that. The Quran says, believe, use your intellect, look around your world, look at the heavens, the sun, the moon, the clouds, the rainfall, the oceans, the stars, your own body, crops, fruits, vegetables. It invites the attention of humans to the world around them so that they look at it. And you know, this world has now been explored so keenly and deeply by humans, by science, that today, 1400 years later, man knows a lot more about this world than what people knew when the Quran was being revealed. But even today, there is no one mention of the Quran which can be so seriously challenged that people could say that, look here, you know, this book is not accepted because this statement is not making any sense. Even in the case of science, if you had a book of science that was written 200 years ago, today it's useless. It's a piece of rubbish. It probably has no place except in the Museum of Science. Because everything that man had learned and understood 200 years ago has already been challenged. And it's not relevant anymore. But this book is more than 1400 years old. And it has spoken about many things which even today science explores. And yet it's fresh, it's clear, it's confident. And we talk about it. People do raise objections, but then those objections are answered. And we all know that there are some very remarkable mentions in the Quran which were not possible to be there had it been a human's presentation. For example, in chapter 10, Surah Yunus, verse 92, the Almighty mentions the fact that when Pharaoh, the tyrant king, when he was about to be drowned, the Almighty said to him, Al-yawma nunajjika bi badanika. Today I am going to save your body. Litakuna liman khalfaka aya. So that you become, for the people to come later, a sign. That is, God promised that Pharaoh's body is not going to be allowed to be disintegrated the way human body normally disappears. And that's something that did not happen for 1300 years for people to see. The Quran was fully preserved. This verse, Al-Yawma nunajjika bi badanika litakuna liman khalfaka aya, was being recited, but there was no badanika visible. You know, it was not there. And then it was discovered, and we have it right now in the Museum of Cairo, and you know, presenting a testimony of the fact that the Quran, what it mentions, comes true. So there are so many other examples. The third thing I mentioned was that the Quran says that the Prophet, when he came to this world, his arrival was prophesied, announced beforehand. The Quran says that the people of the book, يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُمْ. They recognized him the way they recognized their own sons. They knew him quite clearly. It was mentioned in the earlier books. Those earlier books are available even today. We've got Old Testament, we've got New Testament. In the Old Testament, there are mentions which clearly point to a prophet who is to come, and that can only be Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and nobody else. In the New Testament, which the Christians believe to be God's word, there are mentions about a prophet to come, which can be nobody except him. So the testimony is still there. And finally, the prophet's own prophecy, his own claim that he is going to dominate, it came about during his lifetime. In Battle of Badr, 15 years after the announcement that he was the prophet, the 70 leaders of Quraysh were killed. And 7 years later, it was announced that whoever doesn't believe is going to be punished. Like the nations who received God's message from the messengers earlier, they were punished. Likewise, his enemies were also punished. So what I'm trying to say is that this question which was raised by Michael Hart, that he was supremely successful both in worldly and religious matters, it happened because the Prophet, may God bless be on him, he presented his teachings in a manner that they convinced people. They believed in it. They knew that it's true. And then they followed it. And people can see that his followers who were devoted to him were the ones who actually not only followed him in matters that have got to do with worship and religion, but they follow him in everything that he taught as God's message. The last thing which I would mention, I would repeat that I mentioned earlier as well, that this understanding, this belief, is something which is meant for the entire humanity. There are people who are born Muslims, and there are many others who are born non-Muslims. Muslims are expected to believe truly and properly, not traditionally, not simply emotionally, but truly and properly. Likewise is the expectation from non-Muslims. But why would non-Muslims believe? When they would believe only when the message is going to be presented to them by Muslims properly. And Muslims can only deliver this message if they satisfy two conditions. They understand the message themselves first, and number two, they behave properly. Their character, their morals, they reflect with their personality that they are actually reliable people. My message to you, brothers and sisters living in Japan, is that you cannot run away from the reality. You cannot escape the reality that you are representatives of Islam. You are representatives of the Prophet, may God mercy be on him. Your name reflects it. Your coming to the masjid reflects it. Everybody knows that these people are Muslims. So the message here has got to get across to the people who are the bearer of this message. And I tell you that in order for this message to be delivered to the rest of the mankind, the Almighty arranged for Muslims to migrate to countries which are predominantly inhabited by non-Muslims, so that you live there, your neighbors are non-Muslims, your teachers are non-Muslims, your class fellows are non-Muslims, your colleagues, your business partners, your subordinates, your bosses who come across and interact with you. They are with you. They see your behavior, they see your character, and through you, they get introduced to the message of Islam. So, the message of God, as was presented by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was effective because it was to be the last message of God. God caused it to be preserved in the form of the Quran and Sunnah. The message is convincing, it gives arguments, it makes its point clear to everybody who cares to understand and use his intellect. But obviously it's a message which has to be first understood by those who claim to believe in it. And it has to be presented not just verbally, but more importantly through the right behavior and the right conduct of Muslims. May the Almighty enable us to understand God's message properly, and may He enable us to become the true representatives of Islam, no matter which part of the world we live in. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much for a very enlightening talk, Dr. Khalid. And now we open the floor for question answers. I have some questions already sent to me from the floor by sisters, but let's first allow anybody over here who would like to ask a question to ask the question directly. Are there any questions, please?
I can assure you that there will be no question in the first 5 minutes. So please better focus on what sisters have asked. It takes time for you to warm up. But okay, go ahead.
Any questions? All right. Are there any questions, or shall I move to the question asked by one of our sisters?
It's good to know that they were listening.
So, one of our sisters has asked a question. What makes you compare science and religion? Religion is a person's belief, while science is a practical activity on the basis of experiment and observation.
You know, this question has been raised because there is an assumption behind this question. And if you allow me, in my presentation, I have already challenged that assumption. The assumption is that belief is belief. What has it got to do with science or arguments or reality? I am a Muslim. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of God. I repeat it 5 times, the same statement 50 times, the same statement 500 times. My mother put it across in my ears so many times. I used to go to the masjid, I used to hear the same story so many times, and therefore I believe. What has it got to do with science? My first question to you, sister, in turn is that if that is what belief is, what is wrong with the beliefs of other people who had their beliefs through the same process? Repetition, the same thing repeated over and over again. If each one of us is saying the same thing, there is no question whether it's right or wrong. It is right. Why? Because it is right. Why? Because everybody is saying it. Have you ever been to a place where there are only Christians? Have you ever been? When you go there, the statement that Isa alayhi salam, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is repeated. and repeated so many times that everybody says that that's true. Nobody can question it. What I'm trying to emphasize is that the Quran is saying that that is not the reason why you should believe. You should believe what has been presented in the belief because it's true. And why is it true? Because the statements that are made are the statements which are correct. They cannot be proved wrong. They have to be understood. They have to be compared with other claims. And then you will see sooner or later that they are making a lot of sense. Science is a limited domain of human learning where some people or many people have decided that in order for them to know the world that they are living in, they explore, do experiments, and find out realities about this world. How is it working? How is it functioning? It is not within the scope of science to decide whether there is a God or not. It is not within the scope of science to decide whether there is going to be life hereafter. Science is concerned about making this life, first understanding what is happening in this life, how is it happening, what are the principles, and how to make it better, how to improve the quality of this life. Why am I using sometimes the science, the methodology of science, or why am I referring to the area which is described, the discipline that is described as science to show that Quran is the word of God? Because the Quran mentions certain things. The Quran mentions certain realities which are now explored by science as well. And it is remarkable that what has been understood by science today was mentioned more than 1400 years ago by a text which never claimed to be a book of science. There is a Muslim scholar, intellectual, who very rightly said that what science explores and what the Quran says, they don't contradict each other. Why? Because what science explores is the act of God. And what the Quran says is the word of God. And there can be no conflict between God's words and His deeds. The two are consistent. So that, for example, the Quran mentioned when there was no trace of this understanding that these mountains that we see around us, they are a reason for this planet Earth to be stabilized. It was mentioned very clearly and confidently more than 1400 years ago. There are many other things that are mentioned. I'm not saying that you start proving science from the Quran. What I'm saying is that there are clear mentions in the Quran which, when you now see in the light of the evidence of scientific realities, you find that they don't conflict. They're consistent. So my submission is, sister, that when you say that belief and science are two different things, I also accept it. But what I have said in the light of the Quran is that belief is based on evidence, because belief is truth. And truth has to be understood through your intellect. And one of the things human intellect has achieved is some discovery of scientific realities. So, we need to sometimes discuss science while we are talking about religion, but obviously not always.
Thank you very much. I hope Dr. Khalid answered the question. Now, is there any other question? It doesn't have to be exactly on the topic today. If you have any other question, you're not clear about something. Yes, Bilal?
Like a simple question, like as you mentioned from his presentation, like we all know that the God is created this earth and the whole universe in the planet way, and it also goes through on this planet. And it's not a question, but I want to know that like nowadays we like saw like lots of articles written about the global warming or something else like this kind of disasters because of this one. So what do you think? Is it because of the God's plans that's why it's happened, or it's because of we have did something wrong that's why it's happened?
Why is global warming taking place? Is it because of God's plan, or is it because we're doing something wrong? You see, when you understand the Quran, you learn about the fact that God has given humans freedom and liberty in this life. Why? Because this life is a trial. Had He forced humans to do according to His plans strictly, this life won't have been a trial. So when freedom is given to humans, they sometimes use it positively and they sometimes misuse it. So it's a misuse of human freedom that sometimes in our industrial progress and in trying to go for more and more luxuries of life, we go against the balance that needs to be maintained in using the resources of the nature. So the answer to your question is that God's plan was that humans should be provided with freedom. Now humans use their freedom in a manner that the environmental balance went wrong. They have the ability to correct it, to put it back. But God does not normally interfere in these matters. Why? Because He wants to allow people freedom, which is good enough for them to be tested. If you are going to take care of your health, you will become healthy. If you will not, you will be taken ill. In either case, God is not going to interfere. Yes, if you use medicine and you pray to God, He is going to make your medicine effective. He is going to strengthen your understanding that medicine was also created because of God's knowledge that was provided to people. But normally, in the worldly matters, He has allowed freedom to be available so that His purpose of trial is achieved. As Brother Dr. Knight keeps saying, I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, Dr. Zakir Naik always say, hope I answered the question. Yeah. Any other question?
This kid has some questions.
He's asking it in a very strange language. Unfortunately, we don't understand.
I want it clear. He's asking when is this man going to stop talking? You mentioned that there were a few questions from sisters, but
Yeah.
the S of your question is what you did not.
Well, it was the sister's question about religion and science.
Okay.
That was from the sister.
Right.
So I asked that. You have a question, it seems.
I had a question, but it's not mine, but it was a question of a friend of mine who recently converted to Islam.
In other words, we should not blame you for this.
I wanted to ask that question instead of him.
Right. I think you can also ask questions like that. Not my question. Somebody else's.
His question was, as we know, we are promised to live eternally in paradise, and how to say, in a sense, experience happiness and be happy all the time. So he was wondering if we experience happiness all the time and for eternity, won't the happiness itself lose its value, and how can we not get bored out of it?
So your friend asks you, who's a new Muslim, that if we are going to get happiness in the paradise and we're going to live there forever, are we not going to get bored? I'll try to answer this question, but I'm curious. What did you answer? Okay. Tell him that the description of the paradise that you find in the Quran itself explains that that description is metaphorical. It's mutashabihat. That is, the reality of paradise is something nobody knows. The Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said that the paradise is a place mala aynun ra'at. No eye has seen it ever. Wala uzunun sami'at. No ear has ever heard of it. Wala khatara ala qalbi bashar. Nor any heart has ever imagined it. It's so immensely beautiful that you cannot imagine it. However, in order to describe it in a manner that you get some idea of it, the Almighty has given some worldly examples. The examples which were close to the imagination of the Arabs of the time when it was revealed. That's why you find in the description of paradise dates, grapes, but you don't find mangoes, because there weren't any mangoes in the Arabian Peninsula, you know. But this is one aspect. These are mutashabihat. And the Quran says that what are mutashabihat and metaphorical? Just understand what is written in its appearance, you know, in its words. Don't go any deeper into them. But there is another aspect of the description of paradise, one of which is in Surah Al-Kahf, the Almighty says, La yabghuna anha hiwala. They will never ever want to go away from it. In other words, the happiness is going to improve every day. The excitement of yesterday would be replaced by greatest excitement of today, and so on. The Quran says, وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِي أَنفُسُكُمْ وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَدَّعُونَ. You will get there whatever you will ask for, and you will get there whatever your desires would seek. وَلَدَيْنَا مَزِيدٌ. And we have much more than that. The Quran says, لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. There is going to be no fear of the future and no sorrow of the past. The Quran says that if you will be eligible to enter the paradise because of your faith and good deeds, and your parents will also be given the same privilege, and your children, whenever they'll come to this world, all of them, if they will be eligible to enter the paradise, they will all be given to live together forever. So the answer is that there is no question of ever getting bored in the paradise. Imagine God is going to reward the people with whom He will be delighted because of their worldly performance. How is it possible that He will put them in a life which ultimately is going to get bored? No. The Quran says they will never ever desire to get away from there. It's going to be so immensely brilliant, beautiful, exciting, and this is going to continue to improve, and this is going to happen constantly.
There's another question from the third floor.
Keep doing it, sisters, keep doing it.
It's asked by my wife. So if you don't answer this question, she won't let me in the house. I might have to sleep outside.
My dinner is also going to be in
Your dinner is going to be in trouble, I think.
Yeah.
So she says, what is the proper way to convince a non-Muslim that there is only one God? Because the Japanese are scared of believing in just one God. They say that the idea of having many gods gives them a sense of security.
I think, sister, what we need to do is to not be over active in pushing our point of view across to others. Let them believe in and accept what they feel comfortable with. The Quran says that it is not our job to convince anyone. Our job and task is to deliver Bala. As I said in my presentation, the Quran says that everybody already has the understanding of God inside his or her nature. It's another matter that the environment has influenced that understanding. So, when you present the right understanding, and some Japanese friend says that I don't feel comfortable, tell them that this book is from God. It is fully preserved. We've got strong reasons to believe that this is true, and this is what God is saying. Think about it, and take whatever happens in your life seriously. And if you feel comfortable with many gods instead of one God, then I can only pray for you. Because the Quran is claiming that the understanding that there is one God is supported by both intellectual arguments as well as textual evidence. By textual evidence, what it means is that all prophets of God have been presenting the same understanding. Belief in more than one God is a deviation. It's something which is a departure from reality. Why? Because people were presented with an understanding of God which was very scary. And so they wanted to have others through whom they could approach God. They created some smaller gods in their understanding, in their imagination, to feel comfortable that the God who is very strong, probably an angry God, probably a God who is not willing to listen to us, he can only be approached through some partners, smaller gods who are close to him, and we are close to them. Well, tell these people that God is merciful, God is loving, God is caring, God listens to what you say, God is always there for you to be helped, and God says that it is a lie, it is wrong that there is anybody other than God whom you can approach for help in a divine way. So when you are approaching smaller gods, you are approaching beings who don't exist. They are not there. So you are fooling yourselves. You're doing something which is wrong. It's not there. There is only one God. So just tell them. And if they don't feel convinced, well, give them tea to have, cookies, biscuits, maybe some halwa, and have good relations with them. If not today, maybe tomorrow or day after, they might start taking your presentation seriously. But just forget about the fact that you've got to convince people. You've got to deliver the message. The message itself is going to do the trick. Yes, if people ask you questions regarding your understanding and they create problems which you think are causing it to appear not correct, then we should worry to answer them. But if somebody is carrying an understanding because of his or her tradition, all that we can do is to present our understanding politely with evidence and pray for them. And say politely, not angrily, that sister, your understanding that there are other gods, this understanding is strongly rejected by the one and the only God, who is the author of the Quran. So please reconsider your belief. You are doing something which is unreal. Just help understand. Don't ever be harsh. Don't ever be emotional. Don't ever be angry, because that puts the other person off. But don't ever think that it's your job to convince anybody. Your job is to deliver. And we'll talk about that if there are questions. So it's alternating. Sisters, brothers, sisters, brothers. So it was
Yeah.
sisters and brothers.
There is a question
Yeah.
from sister's side, but this is brother's turn.
Brother's turn.
Okay. Any questions?
Yes, yes, please.
I want to present a couple of questions that were given to me when I was in Europe by a Pakistani former Muslim, ex-Muslim who lived Islam, and the questions that he was asking me was, why does God need angels when he can do everything on his own? Why is there need for angels to exist? And the second question was, why does God need to give us this world as a trial when he knows good people and bad people in advance? And with that knowledge, why can't he just divide us into those who will go to hell and those who will go to heaven?
As far as the first question is concerned, as to why did God need angels when he himself could do everything? Well, he did not need angels, but he chose to make a system wherein, for various different purposes, he could have an additional way of getting things done, so that people are tried and tested that way. For example, God has chosen for the angels to make note of what we are saying. You know, مَا يَلْفِظُ مِنْ قَوْلٍ إِلَّا لَدَيْهِ رَقِيبٌ عَتِيدٌ. They don't utter a single word, statement, except that there are scribes ready to write them. God knows what I'm saying, so he doesn't need angels to do the task of making note of it. But on the day of judgment, what the angels would have written will also be shown. Why? So that justice is not only done, but should appear to have been done. It is shown that it's been done, so that nobody can say that, God, you are doing it on your own, but where is the evidence? So he provides with additional evidence, additional reasons for enabling his system to function in a more convincing way for the people. Take another example. We humans, we have been created in a manner that there is a distance between us and God. We cannot see God. It's in the nature of this worldly life. Musa alayhi salam, the great messenger, wanted to see God. And God said, Lan tarani, you can't see me. Instead, you look at the mountain, and he reflected his own self, his existence on that mountain, and it just perished. And Musa alayhi salam fell unconscious. It was an experience, it was an incident that was arranged to show that humans, in their limitations of this worldly life, cannot see God, right? But God had to communicate his message, wahi, to humans. So there was needed an intermediate creature called angels, who on the one hand could take God's message directly from him, and on the other, they could deliver it to humans. So that arrangement was necessitated. God can do everything, but then there could be many other questions that could be raised. Why did he make anything? Well, He's made all these things so that His will gets implemented through a system. And, that system is what is visible, that we can see. And angels are a kind of an intervening medium, which is sometimes needed because we humans have our limitations, and we have been made in that manner because this life is a trial. The second question that you mentioned is that why did God have to cause us to go through the trial of this life when He already knew what we are going to do? And He could have decided that he's going to pass and He's going to fail. You know why? Because I already know. And people would have said, okay, sir, nothing has happened. You know that I am a bad person, and you know that he is a good person. You know, the chap that was asked this question, in that case would have asked an even more serious question. What's going on? Nobody has done anything, and people have been made to appear guilty of doing things wrong, and some people have been made successful for doing things right. You see, the reason why these people get confused is that they try to understand God as if He's another human like us. God is a human. God is not even a superhuman. God is God, the Creator, the Sustainer, the Almighty, eternal. He's there since there's no starting point, and He's going to be there forever. Right? Therefore, the Quran says that He's unique. Laysa kamithlihi shay'un. So stop imagining about God the way you imagine about yourself. Now, having said that, when I and you do something good, God knows two things. He knew beforehand the good things that you will do. But He also knew beforehand that the good things that you will do on your own volition, on your own discretion, independently. God's knowledge beforehand will not force you to do good. You will do it independently. That is what God knows before. But because God is perfect, His knowledge is perfect, therefore He already knows. His knowledge will not force you to do anything good or force you to do anything bad. You're smiling, so I need to say something more then. You know, the reason why sometimes we ask questions and then get baffled is the same, that we don't fully understand the reality of God. I'll give you another example. In order for God to help us understand that this is a reality, that things happen independently, and yet God knows beforehand. Have you ever seen a dream that has come true? Many people see dreams. I have come across 3 individuals in my life. 3. Maybe some of you might add to that number. But there are 3 individuals who have come to me in different stages of my life telling me that they see real dreams beforehand, and they actually happen. So for example, a man sees a dream that another person will meet with an accident. His car will collide with another car. That dream is seen beforehand. It happens many times. But you know what happens actually? Your car, you decide to take to the road. And he also decides to take his car onto the same road. He does it independently. Nobody forces him to do it. You do it independently. Nobody forces you to do it. You come together and you meet with that accident, but you or somebody else is shown it beforehand in his dream. This is to tell humans that, look here, things are happening independently, and yet God knows it beforehand وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. You know very little from God's knowledge. So be humble. You know, one of the problems is that man becomes arrogant. He thinks that he can know everything. So in order for true knowledge to get to humans, you must acknowledge your limitation. And human limitation, through various examples, makes him to believe and to understand is that we cannot know everything. Like my eyes, I can see you. Although I can tell you are hazy. You know, my eyes are not perfect. Now I can see you better. But I can still see you. But I cannot see sun when it is blazing. Why? Because humans are limited. My vision, my ability to hear, my physical strength, everything is limited. The trouble with humans is that they don't want to acknowledge that their knowledge is limited. So for them to be able to imagine that there is a God who knows beforehand, and yet what he knows is happening independently of his knowledge, is true. So when you don't understand it, the correct answer, the correct statement is that I don't understand it. Not everything that you don't understand is wrong. You see, in order for something to be proved wrong, you have to show it wrong. The fact that you don't understand it doesn't mean that it's wrong. If I write on the board 2 plus 2 is equal to 5, you can say confidently that it's wrong. But if I write an equation which you don't even understand, it really is going to be downright stupidity for you to say that, sir, it's wrong because I don't understand. I think the right expression, the right statement is that I don't understand it. Full stop. And that is what you must do as an honest human being, because as honest human beings, we do know that we have limitations. And it is not against intellect. It is exactly in accordance with human intellect. That human intellect, like all other faculties, is limited. If you're still smiling, I can't do anything about it.
Yeah, the reason I'm smiling is the answer that I gave him was the same as
Absolutely brilliant. Now I am smiling. Excellent.
Any other question?
No. Is this now?
No, it's the sister's turn.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, there's a question.
Don't even ask them.
All right. What was the response when you spoke about Islamic ethics and traditions in a foreign land?
Now this question has come from somebody who knows you. Why was this question asked in the first place? How does she know? Unless she is the fourth person that has come. I've come across. Sister, you were actually right. You know, I went to India. I was invited to deliver a lecture on ethics.
This sister is from India.
Oh. Now, I'm getting even more convinced that she has true beliefs. Okay. Now this is one of the most problematic things in the modern world. You know, you have a name, I can't change my name. My name is Khalid Zaheer. You write it on Google search, and in comes Khalid Zaheer. with all his doings, good or bad. Sister, I went to India in 2005, and I was asked to deliver, amongst other presentation on ethics, business ethics, ethics in general. And honestly, I didn't do anything except for the fact that I presented the understanding of verses 22 to 39 of Surah Bani Israel, chapter 17. But obviously I didn't mention that this is Quran. I just paraphrased them, so that people thought that what I'm saying is a general understanding. There were something like 400 participants in that conference. And I was told that probably 3 or 4, maybe 10 of them were Muslims. The rest of them were all Hindus. And at the end of the session, although each session used to be followed by questions and answers, this session was also supposed to be followed by questions and answers. But there was no question, except for the fact that there was an elderly fellow, probably the senior most amongst them, who stood up and he said that, you know what, whatever you have mentioned is exactly what we also understand and believe in. SubhanAllah. And this is something which reinforced my understanding that morality is given by God. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. God has instilled in man the understanding of what is good and what is bad. This understanding is not exclusively the domain of Muslims. It's universal. So that's the response that I got from them. They didn't disagree. And you know what the first point in that description is? وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. Your Lord has decided that you're not going to worship anyone except Him. That was the first point I made. And a Hindu and elderly person stood up and said to me that, you know what you've mentioned, we have no disagreement whatsoever. Brothers.
Any question?
I am sure he didn't say to you only 2 things.
Oh, could you repeat it?
He did not just say to you 2 things about Islam.
Yeah,
He
I was
also
talking
mentioned
about
many other things.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Don't recall anything difficult.
Any question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would like to just know a little bit more shortly about Wahhabi, because I've heard something about this. Is there any difference beliefs from Hanafi or there is some different or opposite beliefs in Wahhabi people against Islam?
You see, when certain labels are used by people, religious people, they mean different things to different people. For example, interestingly, in the Pakistani environment, because I come from Pakistan, I'm telling you, that there are 4 well-known sects, religious sects. There are Shias, there are Ahl Hadith, there are Barelvis, there are Deobandis. When a Barelvi is going to use the expression Wahhabi, he would mean both Deobandi and Ahl Hadith. When a Deobandi is going to use the expression Wahhabi, he would mean Ahl Hadith. Ahl Hadith would say that we are not Wahhabis. So it all depends. We know that, this famous scholar, Abdullah ibn Abdul Wahhab, in the Arabian Peninsula, well, it wasn't Saudi Arabia then, it later became Saudi Arabia. He took some steps against what he thought was shirk and bid'ah taking place in the Arabian society. His steps that were supported by the king were very strong. Now, I'm using the word carefully. I'm not saying harsh, I'm saying strong. In that, some graves were bulldozed, graves that were being worshipped according to his understanding and perception. And there were certain other places where people used to go at throng for getting blessings. Like it is said, for example, the tree where this truce of Hudaybiyah took place. people would go there, and it was removed. Now, because of this strong step or steps taken by the scholar, there were others who reacted. Some agreed with him. Some said it was too strong and harsh. He could have done it. He could have introduced reforms gradually. He could have done otherwise. But there were some others who thought that what he did was absolutely wrong, harsh, and they go as much extent as saying that it was evil. Those people who thought that there was nothing wrong with going to the tombs, graves of the pious people, saints, they have a strong. Now, the people who are called Wahhabis are the people who have this understanding that we must learn our religion only from the message that we have been given by the Prophet, may Allah's mercy be on him. And that message is in Quran and Hadith. And because the Quran is, relatively speaking, brief and call it comprehensive, and Hadith is descriptive, is detailed in its mention. And now that many scholars have sorted out things and have categorized Hadith as reliable, sahih, and unreliable, weak, let's take what is mentioned in Ahadith as the most authentic source of Islamic learning and implement it in spirit as well as in letter, and not allow any relaxation to people who are doing things differently. So call it this stance, this attitude, this way of understanding and following Islam, which had a certain kind of personality trait at its back as well. You know, there was a certain person who became the role model and hero of those religious people, and thus, you know, there are different points of view that are now being presented for the group of people who are described as Wahhabis. I hope I've answered it. I'm not convinced
It's
myself.
a similar question as Hilal. Hilal, its sister grandma. Okay. Almost similar question as Hilal. She says, Muslims as a nation are in great trouble these days. Is this according to Allah's plan? And if not, what can we do to get it?
When you say Allah's plan, you could mean two things. One is that Allah wanted it to happen, and the other is that Allah knew that it's going to happen. The second thing is correct. The first thing is not correct. God, God wants us to be good believers. God wants us to be successful. God wants Muslims not to be in trouble. But God has chosen that this life be a trial, and therefore He is allowing everybody freedom. That freedom is used positively, correctly by some people, and others are misusing it. So, most certainly, why God knew it beforehand, it's not that what is happening is ideal according to the principles and the teachings that He has given us to follow. Yeah.
Okay, one last question.
Thank you for giving me another opportunity. Actually, I'm doing doctoral course under one Japanese professor. Actually, I'm doing Islamic finance. Basically, I'm focusing on research on Islamic finance. So actually, when we are going to see some product of Islamic Islamic financial product. So in the case we see there are lots of products that all are all are accepted by 4 school of thought, like Hanafi, Maliki, and Shafi and Hanbali is all like school of thoughts. But one thing we found, like in Malaysia, that one like Malaysian Islamic Bank, they are practicing one kind of financing service. This is permitted by only one like school of thoughts, but all other school of thoughts they are rejected. So actually, it's not my question, but when professor asked us, like the Muslim students, whether what should we do? Do we accept this product based on like only one school of thoughts they permitted, or do we reject because the other three school of thoughts they are rejected this product? So what's your argument like? Whether
How much time to wait there?
The time has already passed, so you have minus 2 minutes. Because it was supposed to be at 8:15.
So,
But anyway, we all are here, so we can delay a little bit. The Isha prayer and Shah. Please.
And like another simple question is like whether we have to follow strictly only one school of thoughts, or we can like mix up, like we can follow
so
one.
if
class.
I needed 10 minutes for the first question, he has asked another question.
Which needs another 30 minutes.
So what I probably would do is that I'll be brief, right? And you can contact me later after Salah, if you want to. And I'll be unfairly, unjustifiably brief, right? Answer to the first question. You see, the famous 4 scholars called the Imams of the Sunni school of thought or sect were not just the only scholars. They were prominent scholars amongst many other scholars. But they became more famous and they started getting followed. They approved certain products during their times. The products that were prevalent, that were being practiced. It doesn't really mean that apart from those products that they approved, nothing else is allowed in Islam. They gave their opinion about what was present. Islam is in Quran. Islam is in Sunnah. And Islam is in the footnote description of the Quran and Sunnah called Hadith. So Islam has to be understood and practiced in all different times and eras of Muslims by understanding the Quran, Sunnah and Hadith as best as we can. Something that these great scholars, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, they all did. But this tradition must continue. So when you're talking about a product of the Malaysian Islamic banking system, if you ask me, a very ordinary person, I will try to analyze the product in the light of the principles that have been given to us by the Quran and Sunnah and tell you my ordinary opinion, whether it seems right or wrong. That's one brief answer. The second brief answer is that we are expected to follow just one source, and that is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the religion that he brought. Because we are not scholars, we ask scholars to tell us what he gave us in the form of religion. So when a scholar tells me that is, in his opinion, what Islam stands for in this particular area, and there is another scholar who says that what he is saying is wrong, and he's also a scholar, and he's also a scholar. Now, I will use my intellect as best as I can to decide which of the two is making more sense in the light of Islamic teachings. If I get confused, I will follow the scholar of the one whom I respect more. I am more impressed by. But what if the other scholar gives arguments which makes me convinced that in this particular case, the first scholar is wrong. It is my duty for me not to follow him in this matter where the other scholar has shown to me that what he's doing, what he's saying is wrong. In other words, what I'm saying is that use your understanding honestly, listen to everybody. When you are convinced that amongst A, B, C, D and E is telling what is in accordance with the teachings of the Prophet, may God mercy be on him, you've got to follow E in that matter. But where you are unclear, where you are confused, follow the man you think is a better scholar because of his knowledge, because of his piety, etc. When you say that I am just following one scholar and nobody else, then you know what I'm saying? You are saying, I'm not going to listen to anybody else. I am not even going to read the Quran and understand it independently. Well, that is what nobody can do. You've got to follow the religion that has been given to us by the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him. For that, I have to listen to everybody. I cannot say to anyone that, look here, I am not going to listen to you because I am already listening to somebody else. That would really mean that at times some scholars might say to me something which others are saying is shirk. They say this shirk, but I will say, shut up. He is my scholar and I am going to follow him blindly. Can I do it? I can't do it. I have to listen to him. How is it shirk? I'll ask him. He is saying that what you're telling me is shirk. Explain to me. And unless and until I am satisfied that what he's saying is not shirk, I will not follow him in that regard. So that's what my understanding is, that all these scholars are a great help. They tell us what the Prophet gave us as religion. When they all agree, well, it's great. But if there is a disagreement, I have to understand as best as I can what the right view is. When I understand, I will follow what I think is the right view. When I don't understand, I will follow the one who I think is a better scholar. Full stop.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Khalid sir, for giving us a very interesting and good talk. And I think everybody enjoyed the question answer session as well. And we are really grateful to Dr. Thank you very much.
Really grateful for the opportunity. Jazakallah.
प्रोफेसर जी जो चलेगा ना तेरा देखना है नीचे है कि नहीं
फड़ के ले आओ
So